as you guys were encountering a compound with vehicles in it. You might have noticed that they blew up. That was none of you. Turns out that what you guys were doing was alongside the militia. We did not know were in the area, and they were executing their own operation. What they radioed to us and to the North Star, thanks to Jarvis for lending that radio, we were able to get very brief contact, not with anyone who has any kind of communications or no leader or anything like that, just some guy on the ground. And he radioed in that the rest of Calamar was basically rigged to blow. They were basically going to go, they're just going to raise it essentially. They believed that it was too far gone. They had given secret orders basically to civilians to evacuate as quickly as possible, and to do so during actually last week's off. So during that time, civilians were evacuating Calamar as secretly as possible due to the fact that the Crimson Devils like to keep their hands on civilians and use them as essentially shields so that mortars and things can't strike. And those civilians were escaping. The last of them escaped tonight. You might have seen their vehicles driving away. There were still some civilians in the area, as we can't prevent that, but the militia got most of them out before they decided going around to try and destroy infrastructure. Those vehicles were rigged to blow, as were multiple points of infrastructure in Calamar and several other key locations such as the port and several of the power facilities. So if you heard explosions happening, that was actually the militia setting those off. If we had had contact with them earlier, we might have been able to know about this plan or work alongside them with this plan. But since we had no contact, this was all happening behind the scenes. We had no idea they'd be here. However, we did very briefly get contact with them, and unfortunately, due to the severity of the situation and the fact that these bombs are essentially on timers, we were unable to retain communication with the militia. And at this time, we do not have any additional contacts that we can go to. So whenever we get the chance to find the militia again, if we want to get in touch with them, we're going to have to make that an objective, as we were unable to do so effectively today. We were only warned as to what was going on in Calamar, hence the fast retreat to the airfield. As you guys got to the airfield, the big Mamba Jamba of this op happened. You might have noticed that CSAT assets were being deployed. CSAT assets are both being sold to and used by the Crimson Devils. We also know that CSAT is on the island. At the same time as you guys retreated to the airfield and were dealing with some additional contacts there, the Hyperion and the Carrier Strike Group off the southern shore of Lingor had moved approximately 10 nautical miles closer to Lingor, and in the process became under contact from enemy forces. We're unsure if they are Crimson Devils or CSAT, but they were using CSAT equipment. The fleet was able to dispatch most of the enemy force, but we are at this point at red alert, and the fleet is no longer performing as basically a sort of staging zone. They are now active combatants in this fight. This might get out. The international news might hear about this. The media might hear about this. We don't know yet. If it does, the tensions between the CSAT and NATO nations and alliances will become extremely tense, if not break entirely, possibly causing wouldn't want to say world war, but something very close. We're not sure how deep this is going to go or how quickly this is going to degrade, but we are currently at red alert right now. The strike group is going to begin deploying in full force its assets to the Calamar airfield. NATO forces will move in via the fleet and will begin to clear the rest of Calamar, creating Calamar or making Calamar into a staging site for all NATO forces. Following this operation, NATO forces or I should say the Hyperion and the Brass for NATO will be taking control of the military situation on Lingor. We will no longer have point as Polaris, as we originally did, which means that NATO will begin conducting operations on their own. What will happen with our team is Polaris will begin to support NATO in those efforts, and we will continue to complete our own objectives along the side as NATO deals with the bulk of the enemy threat. That means that while we have been doing conventional assaults for a long time, and while a lot of this act has been conventional assaults, we will begin slowly transitioning into more precise precision methods and maneuvers, and hitting some more specific and hopefully cleaner objectives than the sort of bulky, messy, full-on assaults that we've been doing. Now, that does not mean we will not do assaults. We will probably be assisting NATO with a lot of those, but we will definitely be doing other things as well. Less assaults and more of those other things. We'll hopefully find a good balance in terms of actual fun gameplay as well. So we'll see what that looks like. Side ops will be an opportunity to sort of explore some of those more experimental things, as well as grow the narrative on little smaller story beats. But main ops will continue to be kind of our bread and butter, where we kind of really evolve the story and push it forward. Okay. If you're incoming under contact from enemy forces, and with us unsure at this point of CSAT or Crimson Devils who's doing what, obviously CSAT is complicit due to the fact that it is their equipment, so we are considering them to be basically yellow alert right now. If you see them, consider them hostile, but do not attempt to kill them unless they shoot at you. That's ROE. But CSAT in general is not considered friendly or neutral party in this situation. Crimson Devils obviously are always an enemy. Outside of that, the local government on Lingor has, as far as we know, been completely oppressed. We have received no more contact with the government on Lingor, including the president here, and NATO forces intend to locate and find various local leaders and leaders on the island, and see if we can reinstate them. That'll be something that Polaris will end up being tasked with in the future, and that will be sort of more of those guerrilla warfare things we do. Okay, that's the situation. With Calamar also being under our control, or at least soon to be under our control, as of probably the next op, that also means that Calamar will become a staging point for aircraft, fixed-wing, and helicopters, as well as numerous new NATO troops. However, what will change? We will no longer have control over NATO maneuvers. They will now be using their guys as they see fit. The only option we have is to either request that they help, which they can deny, which means that we can request, hey, can they move here? And they might say, no, we're not going to move anybody, or we have other things we're doing. Or, if we can get in touch with the militia again, there is a chance that we can use their forces as support forces in the future. So militia will become very valuable as NATO starts to move on to its own things, and we are moving into a supporting role. The no-fly zone over Calamar will be dismantled as of likely the next op or the one after, as we will begin sweeping the sector for any remaining anti-air assets. Obviously nothing shot us down on the way in, so we believe it's mostly clear, but we will continue to sweep that so that when we get our guys in there, Calamar will no longer be a danger zone. FOB Wonka will remain our FOB. We do not have any plans to move just yet, but there will be some, as a gameplay point, there will be some fast travel options for specific individuals to get to different places between these sectors, at least in the beginning of the op. Outside of that, additional intel will be given to the intel team later. They can sort of disperse that as they see fit. But that should be the majority of the big talking points for what just happened today. We don't know about the earthquakes. We don't know about any of that, as far as we know. Lots of stuff was happening on the northern side of the island. None of it really transferred down here. The only reason you were clearing out Calamar was because of the militia, not because of earthquakes or artillery. Whatever that was, we believe affected the northern side of the island. We don't know what it is. But we'll continue to look into that. That is currently the situation as of this point. So we are in full-blown war at this point, combat, at least here. We are trying to keep it from getting out to the rest of the world, because if that happens, things will become very dangerous very fast. Possibly. So there will be a lot of stuff we need to do in the meantime. There will also continue to be research going on about enemy weapons projects, as well as various things regarding how much equipment and gear CSAT is providing to the Crimson Devils and vice versa. And if there's any sort of way that we can get some espionage on them, there will be some ops for our intel team and for the rest of you guys to do that, so that we know what's going on parts of the island we don't see. Okay, that's about it. Before I pass it off to anyone, you guys have any questions? Okay, if you guys have any questions after the fact, you can let me know, and I'll stay on for a little bit. But for the time being, the first thing I'm going to do is pass it to, we'll say Finch and or, is Cronus here? Yes, Cronus. If whoever wants to speak first about how things went with your plan and how things went as the intel team.
pretty good.
Stupid. Alright, so, overall, I think the plan went as well as it could have for what ended up happening. Obviously, we didn't really expect for Bilbao to be under assault when we showed up, but, you know, it was happening. Thankfully, though, we kept with the plan. Sentinel continued south while I and Cronus went to Bilbao to make sure that NATO forces were succeeding in defeating the Hammer forces there. Once we were certain that Bilbao was under control, we met back up with Sentinel, at which point we got bogged down pretty hard on Hill 36, I think. I know a few people were able to push out after I had gone down and reached the wall to the airfield. After which, I think me and Cronus went towards the radio tower while they continued into the base itself. Once Sentinel got into the base, I think they ended up clearing these first two buildings, and then something happened where they had to re-enter the air base and continue sweeping afterwards. Then we ended up clearing the air base pretty easy once we actually got everybody together and doing it. And Sentinel continued into the town, started sweeping through all that. Me and Cronus dealt with some guys on the hill and the mortar team. And afterwards, we met up with the militia guys. Talking with the militia guys was kind of a pain because it was everybody crowding around the one person, sort of just screaming and trying to get the same questions out all at once. But then we came under fire from across, and Red moved in alone and started dealing with it. Afterwards, we started feeling earthquakes and tremors, and I think it was Jarvis, who started radioing in saying return to the airfield. So we packed up and left, went back to the airfield. NATO showed up, dropped off more troops, or before that, a bunch of paratroopers came in, but I'm guessing they were all chumps or something because they didn't really do anything. And then NATO landed and is mission success.
Cool. In terms of completing objectives, primary objectives were completed, Calamar and the airfield are, have a good night of it. Calamar and the airfield are clear, so obviously that was a success. Obviously we were unable to move on Raylon, so that would have to happen at another time. But that is not considered a failure or anything like that. That was an objective change out of sight of your control. Yeah. So this mission is considered a success. Okay, Cronus, anything from you?
Oh, sorry.
Man, those fucking mortars, crazy, dude. Pretty much no. No. Good stuff.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Cool. Sorry, do you have anything else to mention?
Nope. I'm good.
Awesome. Architect.
We didn't really get to sweep a lot of the town. The initial plan was to head down south and then come back up north. But leading alongside Red is like following a puppy on a leash at some points. Not a lot of radio communication on changes and movements. And rooftops. Oh god, I'm fed up dragging people off of rooftops from either any kind of bullshit. And battle buddies. Stick with your battle buddies, stick with your team. There's a lot of team mixing that we were trying to avoid.
I turn around and like every guy, I look at the GPS just to